Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's Pro Tools video. Today we will be going over lesson 3 in the Pro Tools 110 handbook. We're going to be talking about folder tracks, the different types of folder tracks they are, customized coloring of tracks in Pro Tools. We'll also talk about scrolling to tracks and managing what you see, and the difference between tick-based and sample-based tracks in Pro Tools and how you can alter those. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so here's my Pro Tools session. So I've got it up and running and ready to go. I'm going to switch now to my mix window. And over here, I just want to show you that so far I only have audio tracks and aux tracks and instrument tracks in my mix. You can tell at the bottom of the track, there's these little icons. So these little sideways Christmas trees are the audio tracks. These arrows that go down are the aux input tracks. And then we go over, well, I don't have any instrument tracks in this session, but here's my master fader. Notice it's a sideways M. But anyway, I can add folder tracks into my session, and folder tracks are really useful for organizing. In this session, I have like 30 tracks or so, more than 30 tracks, and it's a lot to scroll back and forth and see. And I just barely shrunk all those tracks so I can see them all. There's a really handy shortcut you can use to do that, and it's Option Command M. If you Option Command M back and forth, you can get what's called narrow view of the tracks in the mix window. It just helps you to fit more in your window so you can see more of them at one time. But anyway, having folder tracks in your session can be a good way to organize things. So I am going to go back to the wide view. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to come here to track 8. And I'm going to highlight it so that when I insert a new track, it will insert right after track 8. Then I'm going to use this command, Shift Command N keyboard command, and that's going to open up the new tracks menu to me. And with this new tracks, I can then decide which kind of tracks I want to add. Now, usually when you use this, you just use the mouse and click on things, and that will always work. You can use that, but it's also important to know the keyboard shortcuts with your hand so that you can do it fast. And all you do is hold down the command key and then use the arrows. If you hold down command and arrow up, you start switching which type of track you're creating. If you're, for example, an audio track, you hold down the arrows and click left and right. You can then toggle between mono and stereo, or any of the other surround sound options that you may have available in your version of Pro Tools. So without using your mouse, you can decide if it's going to be mono or stereo. You can decide what kind of track. We want a basic folder track, first of all, so that we can just see what a basic folder track does. But there's also this plus button, which if you hit, it will add another track. So you can add more than one track at a time. And if you minus, it will go away. And yes, there is a keyboard shortcut for that. Still holding down command, you use the plus and minus keys on your numeric pad. If you hit the plus there, you can just add a bunch of different tracks. And then if you hit minus, you can take them all away. So let's add another track into this. This time, let's have this track be a routing folder track. Let's go ahead and add one more, and this third one, let's make it into an aux input track. Let's go to stereo. Okay, so I just barely used the keyboard commands to create those new tracks. Let's go ahead and pause the video for a second and just practice using the command and the arrows and the command and the plus and minus on this new track screen. Just practice navigating and using those things so you can start to learn how to do that better. So now that we've done that, I'm going to hit the create button and create these tracks. And I just created these 3 new tracks here right next to track 8 that I had going on. So folder 1 track, this is my basic folder track. There's 2 types of folder tracks, basic folder and routing folder. Folder 2 is my routing folder track. And so I have both tracks. And first of all, look at the difference. A basic routing folder does not have anything up here. It doesn't have any inserts. It doesn't have any sends. It doesn't have any ins and outs. It's blank. But the routing folder track does have all of those. So already you can see there's a difference. There's perhaps an advantage here. What folder tracks are really for is for organizing your sessions. So when you have lots of tracks, you can take a group of tracks and drop it into a folder track. And then that folder track can open and close. So if you don't want to look at it, you can close it. So you just see the folder there, but you know that you can click on the folder track, open it and see them whenever you want to. So let's give that a try. I'm going to select tracks 1 through 8, and I am going to drag them into my basic folder track. You see how it got highlighted yellow? And I let go. And now there they are in my basic folder track. My folder track has moved to come over here, and I'm now opening and closing it. So if it's closed, you can't see that track. If it's open, you can see all the tracks. Let's switch now over here to the edit window and do the same thing by clicking on the little folder icon in the bottom corner of it. You can open up the tracks that you've dropped into your folder track. And anyway, it's visually just going to be a lot easier to manage and organize your session when you have lots of tracks you're working with. You can use these folders to open and close them. Notice that the color of my folder track is blue, and so the tracks that are inside of it all have this blue line running on the outside, which indicates they are part of that folder track. So anyway, that's it. That's how a folder track works. And let's look now at this routing folder track. So the main difference being that it has sends and it has inserts and ins and outs. What a routing folder track is it's a basic folder combined with an aux input track. That's why I have this aux input track here right next to the routing folder. They basically function the same. So what you usually, or one thing you can do with an aux input track, which you may be familiar with already, is you can create submixes. So with that submix, for example, you can take the 8 drum tracks, route them over to that submix track, that aux input track, and just use the fader from the aux input to control the volume levels of those 8 tracks. So submixing is an important part of what you do in Pro Tools and when you're mixing. But the cool thing about this routing folder is that now it is like that aux input track, and you can then drop the tracks into the folder track so you can open it up and close it. So it's basically a way to organize those submixes where you can fold them up when you're not using them, and then when you want to work in them, you can open them up. So once again, a routing folder functions the same as an aux input track, but also allows you to have a folder track with it and be able to put your tracks in the folder. So anyway, that's the basic difference between those two types of tracks. We're going to talk now about the next thing, which is track colors. And if you'll notice that each track has a different color to it, and these colors are customizable. But first of all, you might not be seeing colors, and that's also a preference. So if you want to be able to see or not see the different track colors in your session, you come up here to view. First of all, let's go to view, edit window view, since I'm in the edit window. Down here at the bottom, it has track color. And if you uncheck the track color goes away. And now there's no colors on your tracks. You can also do that in the edit window. At the bottom of the edit window and the top, the mix window. At the bottom and top of the mix window, you have those track colors. But if you go to mix window views in the view menu, you can turn that track color on and off so that either it's there or it's not. I'm going to go ahead and turn the track color on for both the mix window and again for the edit window. So here I have my track colors on. Now, when you want to customize the track colors, you come up here to the window menu, and in that window menu is a color palette. You open up this color palette and it allows you to customize track colors. So once again, window, color palette. And So select the track that you want to customize. So I will select, how about these 3 purple guitar tracks right here. I'm going to work on customizing them. And then here you have a drop-down menu where you can decide, are you going to customize tracks, the clips in the tracks, the clips in the clip list, or groups or markers. So all these different things you can change the colors for. For right now, let's just keep it on tracks. And I have these purple tracks. I'm going to click red, and now they're red, which is the same color as base. I might not want that. Now they're yellow. Now they're green. So you can select whatever color you want them to be, and just pick it. That's what it is. Now, if you look down here, though, there's also some other customizable thing like the brightness of the track, the saturation. You can use those scrolls. So I'm going to take the track header brightness and scroll to the right, and all of a sudden you'll see that things get a whole lot brighter on my tracks. So I'm going to take it down to the left again, so it's not quite so bright. Track header saturation. This can change the color of the tracks. So now you see it's not just on the header, it's on the actual track itself, in the instrument, the inserts, and the sends, all of those inputs that I'm seeing. And if we come over here to the mix window, you can see that those colors are persisting all the way through the track. So that's kind of cool. Maybe you want to see the color persist all the way through or not. So you can drag it back down, and then you either faintly see it or you don't see it at all, but you'll still see it at the bottom. I kind of like to see it on the tracks. I like that the tracks themselves can have those colors. So I want to turn it on for my session I'm working with. So now I see all those colors. Let's try another one. We did the tracks. Let's do the clips in the tracks. So now I've got it set to work on the clips in the tracks. It is possible to have different colored clips from the tracks themselves. Like these ones already are. I have yellow and purple here. Here I have a red track with a red clip. But now that I'm working on clips, I can change that color to be a green clip. The clip's now green, but the track itself is still red. So you can customize the colors of the individual tracks and the clips. And here's one more thing you can customize. Over here, you have the clips list. And in your clips list, you can also show a color for the clips that are there. Now, one question you're going to get on the test is, do the colors in the clips list have to match the colors on the tracks? And the answer is no. I can select any clip and I can make it be any color I want. And it does not have to match the track that clip is on. So that's an important thing to remember. But you see how when I'm adding those colors, a little bar pops up that shows the color. Now, why are these colors important? Because visually, it helps you organize and find things. If there's a certain clip that you know you want to keep track of because you're going to use it a lot, then you can put a color right next to it and you can immediately find it as the red color in your list. And you don't have to go and read all these tiny words that are on the list together. So anyway, that's how the colors work. That's how you can add them to your session. Now, let's talk a little bit now about adding tracks into your session. There's already the keyboard command, Shift Command N. So anytime you add tracks, that's what you're going to use, right? But there's another way to do it that doesn't have a menu. And all it is double clicking in the blank spaces. So down here at the bottom, do you see this blank space I have underneath my last track? There's a blank space here, a blank space there. If I hold down Command and double click, it creates a new track. What kind of track does it create? It creates an audio track. That's cool. So Command double click will create an audio track. I'm going to click on this blank space now, and I'm going to hold down Option and double click. And now I created an instrument track. Now I'm going to hold down Control and double click, and I have an aux input track. And last of all, I'm going to hold down Shift and double click. And now I have a master fader track. So hold down those modifiers and double click, and you can suddenly create these tracks a lot faster. but you kind of have to memorize this. Command is audio, option is instrument, control is aux, shift is master. Command, audio, option, instrument, control, aux, shift, master. Just get used to that. There's an acronym, AIAM, audio, instrument, aux, master. Audio, instrument, aux, master. Command, option, control, shift. So anyway, practice that. Go ahead and double click in the blank spaces and create a whole bunch of new tracks and just practice creating the different kinds. I'm going to come over here to the mix window now and notice there's a blank space here, so I can double click in that to create tracks. I'm double clicking, creating lots of tracks and just practicing it. What if you hold down two modifiers at once? Control and command and double click. Now I just created two tracks at the same time. I created an audio track and an aux track at the same time. Now I create an instrument and an aux track by holding control and option. What if I hold all three and double click? I just created three new tracks. So shortcut. Hold down those modifiers, double click. Okay, so we just created a whole bunch of new tracks. It by default names them aux1, aux2, aux3, audio 1, audio 2, audio 3. So now, you know, if we're working in session and organizing, we've got to customize their names. Wouldn't it be cool if instead of doing it one at a time, you could do all of them at once? There is a way to rename your tracks all at once. It's called batch renaming. Let's rename a batch of tracks, right? So first of all, you've got to select the tracks that you want. So I've already got this last track selected. I'm going to scroll over here to the first track I want to rename, and it's audio 1. And now I'm going to hold down shift. And when you hold down shift and click, it highlights everything in between. So I had selected this first track, then I scroll over here, I held down shift, I click, and suddenly all the tracks are highlighted. Okay, the easiest way to do batch rename is to right click and then select batch rename. I'm going to go ahead and do this in the other in the edit window. So right click and then you scroll down here to where it says batch rename and you select batch rename. Then it opens up this dialog box. So here is where you input all the things that are going to affect the name of the track. Let's just pretend that these are all vocal tracks. So I'm going to have a prefix that's just going to say vocal. I'm going to type that into there. I'm not going to use inserts or suffixes right now, but it is important to know about this numbering option down here. Numbering, let's start with number 1. That means it's going to go sequentially from 1 on. Number of places is how many spaces. So if you have a number 12, there's 2 spaces, one for the 1, one for the 2. So you can customize the number of spaces you have and the increment between. So one option you want to make sure you have selected when you're customizing this is clear existing name. When you do that, it will take off the aux1, instrument 1, all those natural names that come when you first create the track. Because all I want to say is vocal, and then I want to have the numbers on. So I'm going to push OK. And now I have vocal 1, vocal 2, vocal 3, vocal 4, vocal 5, vocal 6. Anyway, it goes in order all the way to 16. So I just renamed them all at once. So anyway, that's a little bit about how to batch rename your tracks when you need to do that. Now let's go ahead and let's try soloing some tracks. So I'm going to solo this track, I'm going to solo that track. You know, sometimes tracks are soloed in a session. And one thing that happens as soon as you solo a track is up here at the top, you have what's called the track status indicator. And there's an S here for solo. That's the solo status. If it's orange, it means there's tracks in your session that are soloed. The cool thing about it, though, is you can click on that S and it will automatically unsolo any soloed tracks. So you can immediately unsolo tracks. And that's great. Now, what can happen is sometimes you'll open up a session and things won't sound, and you scratch your head for 10 minutes trying to solve it. And then you realize one track in a session with 50 tracks is soloed and you didn't realize it. And it took you 20 minutes to figure out that. And it just Wouldn't it be nice if somehow you could figure it out if there was a solo track in a large session immediately? That's what this track status is for. If it's orange, that means you have a solo track, and then you can just click on it to immediately unsolo any solo tracks. Now you'll notice that there's an M right next to it as well for mute. And you can also see if tracks are muted in your session. And so I'm going to mute some tracks now, and immediately I have that M, that orange M, letting me know there are muted tracks in the session. I'm going to click on it, and when I do, nothing happens. So you cannot use this indicator here to unmute a track. So why? Why can you do it with solo but not with mute? The reason is mute is an effect that you can automate. You can use automation for. So you can create an automatable muted track where maybe parts are muted and parts aren't muted. So because of that, you cannot use that button to unmute things, but you can use the S button to unsolo things. So it's important to remember that. There's also some keyboard commands to help you to solo and mute tracks. So if you select a track that you want to solo and mute, use the keyboard command Shift-M to mute an unmuted track, and use the keyboard command Shift-S to solo and unsolo a track. That's kind of cool. Now, one cool thing you can do is sometimes you might have two tracks that have two different versions of something. And if you select, if both, well, first of all, if you mute one track and then select them both, and then you toggle back and forth with the M button, you'll see that that mute will go back and forth. So as you're listening, you can be muting one track or the other. And there's one more keyboard command I want to show you. I'm going to come back to the top where the folder tracks are. These folder tracks, if you select them, can also be opened and closed with a keyboard command. Shift-F. Shift-F can open and close a folder track. So you have Shift-F, you have Shift-M, you have Shift-S. You can practice doing all those things. Shift-S, Shift-M, Shift-S. Opening and closing folder tracks. Here's a question. If you have the solo or mute button selected on the folder track, will the tracks inside of it sound? And the answer is they will reflect whatever you push. So if you solo it, then all the tracks in that folder session will be soloed and will sound. If you mute it, then all the tracks in that folder track will be muted. I'd also like to mention that you can manage the tracks by using a certain, I guess, view in here. If you go to the left side of the edit window, you have the tracks menu where all your tracks are listed. And up here in the corner, you have this arrow with a drop-down menu, and you have different things you can select here. Show all tracks, which is what it's currently doing. Show only the selected tracks. Right now, I just had the folder track selected, so now it's only showing that selected track. I could also go to show only folder tracks, and now just my folder tracks are showing. Or show only the audio tracks. Now I see all the audio tracks in my session, but nothing else. Show only the master tracks. And here's all my master tracks that I'm showing. So that could be a good way to help you to find things that you want to see in a hurry. Let's go back to show all tracks. There's also a way to hide tracks, and that is these little, I don't know, these dots here next to the tracks. You see that I'm just clicking on them, and as I do, they disappear. Here's the high E guitar. I'm going to click on it right there. Now it's gone. If I click on that dot again, it reappears. So why could this kind of thing be important? And it's because, once again, sometimes you have many tracks in your session and you're trying to just work with a few of them. So wouldn't it be nice to make some of those tracks disappear to make it easier to go around and get the tracks that you want to get? There's also a way to find tracks specifically and put that track right at the top of the list. I want to show you the scroll to track option, which is Option Command F. Now we just did Shift F, which opens and closes a folder track, but Option Command F does scroll to tracking. You get this menu that opens up. Now, if you click inside this menu and start typing, I typed an F, and immediately it went to all the tracks that start with an F. So I can find my FX sub, I can push OK, and now at the top of my list is FX sub. It puts it right there. Option Command F, scroll the track. Now I'm going to try that again. And this time, though, I'm going to delete the letter. And when I do that, there's this drop-down menu with all the tracks in my whole session listed, one at a time. So I can just click one of those tracks at a time, whichever track I'm looking for the cymbal swell track. I'll click on that and push OK. And now I have the cymbal swell track right at the top. So easy to find. So if you're trying to find a certain track and you remember its name, Option Command F for scroll the track, and then you can find it really quick. Now it happens when you have a large session. It's important to remember that each of those tracks are taking up computer processing power and resources. So sometimes that can be a problem because if you have so many tracks taking up those resources, it can create latency and there can be a drag, and you get this error box popping up because your computer's not processing things. So wouldn't it be nice to take some of those tracks and to hide them, or not really hide them, but just make them so they're not taking up resources? And you can do that. And the way is to make them active or inactive. And the easiest way to do that is to select a track that you want to make active or inactive, and then right-click. And when you right-click, you get this menu, and there's an option there that says Make Inactive. So I have just made that track inactive, the drums submix. I can make it active again by right-clicking and click Make Active, and that's how you do it. So anyway, when a track is active, the plugin, or when a track is inactive, the plugins on that track are not taking up computer resources. They're not processing. So you can take those tracks and basically put them to sleep. That's how it's described. It's like, let's put these tracks to sleep so they won't take up resources in our session. And that's the way you do it. So I'm going to make that active. And the last thing we're going to talk about in this video is different track time bases. Pro Tools has 2 time bases: sample time base and tick time base. Tick time base has everything to do with instrument tracks and MIDI tracks. So if you hear or are thinking in tick base, those are the instrument tracks and MIDI tracks. Sample times base is for the audio tracks and all the other tracks that you work with in Pro Tools. Here's the main difference. Sample time based is absolute. Tick time based is relative. That means that if you have an audio track and you recorded it at 80 beats per minute, and afterwards you change the tempo to 90 beats per minute, that audio track is still going to sound at 80 beats per minute, even though it changed to 90. But when you have tick time bases like instrument tracks and you're working with MIDI, if you record it at 80 or create a part at 80 and then you change it to 90, that MIDI track or that tick time base will conform to the new tempo and you will hear it at 90. So that's the main difference between sample base and tick time base. And there are icons that can reflect that. And these are the icons. You see this little blue, I guess you call it a clock with 2 hands of the clock pointing at 5 o'clock or so. That icon means that's the sample-based icon. That's what you see in audio tracks. But here's a different icon on this track. It's a metronome, a green metronome with a white bar that's going side to side. And that is the icon that means tick-based. So each track has these icons there saying whether it's sample-based or tick-based. Wouldn't it be nice if you could take an audio track, which is absolute in time, and you can make it change to the tempo when you change the tempo? Wouldn't it be nice to get an audio track to function like a tick-based track or like an instrument track? The cool thing is you can do that. You can click on this option here and then change the type of track it is. And when you do that, you can toggle back and forth between a sample-based track or a tick-based track. So if I come up here to this electric guitar track that I have and I click on that icon, I can change it from samples to ticks. Now this electric guitar track will conform to the tempo when I have a tempo change. And it's pretty great. It turns it into a tick-based time track. You can also do it the other way around with instrument tracks, and you can change those instrument tick-based time tracks to be sample-based time tracks. And sometimes that's a good idea, especially in post-production or film production projects where you're not really working with music, but you're working with sounds, like the sound of a car crash or an explosion, and you want those sounds to be absolute in time and to not change when you change the tempo. So you could change those the tick-based to sample-based, and then those instrument MIDI sounds will stay put. So that kind of wraps up our session for today. Thank you for coming and watching this video. I hope that it was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.